So one of the things I really admired about Dawkins, and his work has been quite helpful to me, by the way, is that he has this clear-headed faith in science, this in rationality that's typical of the best scientists, perhaps someone like Feynman, for example. But Dawkins, like all true scientists, believes that there is a transcendent truth and that the pursuit of that truth will set us free. And it's those claims that I think are essentially religious. And so I think it's useful to differentiate between the religious impulse towards truth, if you can call that the religious impulse, and the totalitarian aspect of the imposition of religious dogma, which I see actually as a variant not of the religious spirit, but of the totalitarian spirit. Because I do believe the greatest scientists that I've known have a religious reverence for truth. Now, they say objective truth, and that's fine. It's a perfectly reasonable variant of truth. But the reverence itself doesn't seem to me to be scientific. It's predicated on whatever it is that drives reverence. And I'm afraid that what's happening at the level of the postmodern critique is that it's actually a corrosive critique of that reverence itself. It's the claim that that reverence is nothing but a mask for power claims, for example. And that is a corrosive criticism. And it might be corrosive enough to bring the whole damn enterprise to a halt. And I see it shuddering forward with the corruption of journals like Nature and Science and the increasing politicization of every scientific discussion.
Yeah. No, I'm with both you and Dawkins there, in the sense that I, like him, have got this reverence for science and truth, and somewhat skeptical of whether religion shares that, because I think faith is antithetical to it. But he is perhaps wrong that the enemy is conventional religion, because actually creeping up on us has been a much more dangerous anti-Enlightenment force, as you say, the postmodernism and a lot of other things that go with it, and totalitarianism, exactly. And I think the critique you can make of atheists like me, very validly, is that when we throw out the baby, the bathwater, the baby goes too, and we end up with something far worse.
Well, that's the issue.
The cult of Stalin, or the cult of Foucault, or whatever it might be. So in that sense, and actually Richard concedes this, that if you're going to have, if you can't extirpate faith from the human spirit, then you might as well have a mild version of it called the Church of England.
Oh, okay. Well, let me push you a little bit on that too, because I'm very curious about this issue of the faith-predicated presumption of the properly functioning scientist. So it seems to me. So imagine that. You tell me if you think I've got any of these presuppositions wrong, because they're crucially important to this argument. So the first is the belief in the existence of a transcendent object. And I would say that's a faith-based belief, and here's why. So you have a scientific theory, and you can't help but look at the world of objects through that theory. So when you see the world of objects in your discipline, that vision, that perception is informed by your epistemology. But you know as a scientist that you're wrong. But the knowledge that you're wrong is predicated on an assumption, and the assumption is that there is a domain of information that exists as yet outside your presuppositions. And that has to be a faith-based axiom, because given that source of information exists beyond your current set of axioms, you can't encounter it. You have to just accept it as a continuing reality. And it would be the reality of that knowledge that currently lies beyond us.
Well, I certainly think that the purpose of science is to find new mysteries. It's not just to solve them, because in solving one, you always come upon more. In finding out that we're just a marble, a blue marble spinning through space, we then find there are things like suns and galaxies and black holes and things, each of which is a new mystery that we have to address. And I love that aspect about science, that, the more trees we chop down in the clearing of knowledge, the more forest comes into view, as it were, the more stuff we don't know and don't understand. And I think it's worth reminding ourselves that, what gets scientists up in the morning in a lab is not the things they know already. You put them on the shelf and feed them to the students. It's the things you don't yet know. It's the part of the puzzle you haven't yet found out. And we mustn't lose that.
Well, and you did refer to that, and I think this is extremely interesting. You referred to that as a love. And that's not an objective observation in some sense, right? It's a reference to a particular kind of motivation.
Yeah.
And so, but then let's say we can inquire into that a little bit more deeply. We might say, well, what's that love predicated on? And one possible source is that, well, you see that it engages you in a meaningful enterprise, right? So there's a sense of implicit meaning in this search to make contact with that which still lies beyond you. And so that's engaging, and it's deeply engaging. It's part of the instinct of meaning as far as I'm concerned. But it's also predicated on the idea, and I can't help but think that this is fundamentally a religious axiom. And I think it's a Judeo-Christian derived religious axiom, which is that you also believe that the truth will set you free. And in some sense, Matt, our whole bloody discussion today centers on that, right? I mean, you're delving into the COVID-19 mystery because you are making a presumption here against those who would take the pathway of convenience and deceit, let's say, that no, you don't get to do that. I don't care what your rationales are. Something actually happened in Wuhan, and the reason we need to find out what it is because finding out what is true is actually the best pathway forward, regardless of your bloody political preconceptions. And I can't see, and this is a genuine question to you, I don't see that as anything different than a reference to the idea, for example, that the divine word that the word of truth itself is divine, and that the manifestation of that truth is in fact freeing. And I don't think that's a within science claim.
I'm completely happy with that. I can give you some very dull, practical reasons why we need to find out how the pandemic started, so that we can predict where the next one's coming from, so that we can deter bioterrorists and bad actors who might be thinking of copying what happened, etc., etc. But those aren't my real motivation. My real motivation is because I think truth matters more than anything else. There's a wonderful quote somebody gave me the other day, which he said was from Solzhenitsyn, but I don't think it is. I'd like to know who said it. Truth matters more than consequence. The people who don't want us to know what happened are worried about the consequence of finding out what happened. But I'm sorry, the truth comes first. We have to deal with the consequences of finding out the truth. But the truth is what I really care about. And I do think, in a sense, it'll set me free, and you free, and all of us free. It may be uncomfortable, just as finding out that we're not at the center of the universe, we're not a unique creature, we have the same genes as others, we're 40% genetically the same as a banana. These are all humiliating things science has found, but they're not. But for me, they're liberating as well.
You smart, you loyal, you're grateful. I appreciate that.